Introducing TiE Singapore Huddle Sessions.
Hi everyone, my name is Sidhi Dhir and I serve as the Executive Director for TiE Singapore. Thank you for joining in for our this month's huddle, which is in collaboration with Enterprise Singapore. The topic for this month's huddle is discussing the new opportunities for Singapore businesses in terms of expanding to the Indian subcontinent in the post-COVID era. Our moderator for the session would be Vinika. Before I hand it over to Vinika to introduce the speakers and kickstart the discussion, few housekeeping rules. To ask your questions, please use the question and answer button either located at the top of your screen or either it would be on the bottom of your screen. This recording would be shared with all post the session. And lastly, there is a possibility that there might be connectivity issues or some unwanted background music. So please bear with us if something like that happens.
Thank you, Sidhi.
Sorry, another thing. Before I hand it over to Vinika, a quick introduction to our moderator. Moderating this discussion would be Vinika Rao, Dr. Vinika Rao. Vinika is the Executive Director of the INSEAD Gender Initiative and Emerging Markets Institute and the Director of the Hoffman Global Institute for Business Society and Society Asia. Over to you, Vinika.
Thanks very much, Sidhi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, if that is the appropriate greeting for the time zone that you're at, otherwise a very warm hello to you all. It's a pleasure to have you with us for what I think will be a very insightful 35 minutes ahead of us as we explore the startup environment in India. We will be talking today about how India is continuing to position itself as a global economic engine for startups and what this means for entrepreneurs from India, from Singapore, and possibly from elsewhere in the world. And we have a very interesting and exciting panel of experts with us today who will help us to explore this question from three different perspectives. We'll talk about this from the policy perspective, from the perspective of an investor, and then go on to talk about it from the perspective of an entrepreneur. Now, I will want to quickly introduce you to our panelists first, and then go on to the actual panel discussion. We have with us Aastha Grover, who's the head of Startup India at Invest India. She will be able to provide us with a government perspective on the ecosystem being created and the new opportunities for startups in India. To provide us with the investor's point of view, we have with us Sudhir Sethi, who's the founder and chairman of Chiratae Ventures in India. And we have with us Abhijeet Pandit, who's the CEO of SynPhNe, to provide a startup's perspective on the ground realities of what expansion into India really means today. Now, you have access to all of their bios, and they're all highly qualified and with fantastic experience. So I can't really go into explaining all of that right now because it will take too much time. But do please have a look at at all the expertise that they have, and you can frame your questions accordingly. Now, what I thought I would do is to start us off with a few questions to the panelists, and then I will go as quickly as possible to the questions that you're sending in to us. As Sidhi mentioned, you can start sending in your questions already in the Q&A box. I think you also have the option to vote for other questions that have been asked, so I'll have a sense of which are the questions that most of you are interested in, and I'll try and take in as many of those questions as possible. So given our very limited time, I'm going to start right off. And Aastha, if I might request you to unmute yourself and get ready to answer our first question. I'm requesting you first to sort of set the stage for us and give us a snapshot of what the economic measures are that have been taken by the Indian government to support the startup ecosystem, especially in light of this pandemic that we're facing and all the disruptions that it has caused.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Vinika, and thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure to meet you all today. I'll jump to how the government of India reacted to the entire situation. It was in mid-March that the cases in India were growing up and the entire lockdown wasn't announced yet. But we were very proactive enough to establish, a dedicated platform that would invite support from all the stakeholders that were working in silos at that point of the time. So we'll start with, the regulatory measures that were taken. And I'm not jumping to the economic package right now because that came in much later. The regulatory measures were taken at a first front to delay the payments on the loans which startups were struggling to repay, and to reduce the interest on the loans that they already had, and delay all statutory filing requirements from a government point of view. So this took care of the immediate relief and measures which the community needed. Then we realized that there is an immediate need for a lot of resources to help the patients in the hospitals and in quarantine zones. We had it, we were producing about 1 lakh PPE kits. We wanted to scale that up. We were at a shortfall of N95 masks. We needed a lot of sanitizers out there. WHO had came up with a guideline, and we made that guideline public enough so that everyone could make it from their own lab research itself. So we started a supply demand initiative to connect both these, the adopters of these technologies and products, as well as the suppliers of this. So this was done on a dynamic location basis. Then we realized that a lot of essential goods were getting struck. So DPIIT set up a control room so that any query that was that came to that control room, that this truck is there, but it is supplying medicines to a quarantine zone or a state hospital, we need your intervention. That query was responded to within less than 48 hours. To give you precise, 98% of the queries were handled in 24 hours, 93% were handled in 48 hours. So we tried and covered the entire ecosystem by easing regulatory, connecting supply demand, procuring innovations, and helping with passes. Recently, the economic package has also been announced, in which a lot of relief measures have been announced for MSMEs, and all those are eligible to be applied by startups. To tell you in very brief, a 3 lakh crore emergency working capital fund. There's a subordinate debt of 20,000 crore fund, which will be invested like a CGTMSC through banks and government, will provide the guarantee of rupees 4,000 crore through this fund. There'll be an equity infusion as well of 50,000 crore fund of funds, similar to the fund which SIDBI is managing. And the definition of MSME has also been expanded further to incorporate all these startup pool. In fact, SIDBI also came up with a good loan scheme, dispersing loans within 48 hours to suppliers that were producing specific requirements that were there in the COVID time. So be it ventilator toolkits, be it PPE, be it any other emergency toolkit that was the need of the hour. If you could show the work order, the loan was, fast-tracked. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so that sort of sets the stage. But if I can ask you to perhaps, give us a few specific examples, maybe almost like case studies, where the government has stepped in to help, entrepreneurs or startups with the problems that they've had as a reaction to COVID-19. I think that will really help to give us an idea of what this actually translates into from a company's point.
Sure, Vinika. So let me give you 2 case studies. One from an ecosystem point of view, how the government was trying to fast track this entire process. We requested a request from Air India to provide hazmat suits and protective gears that, for the missions that they were conducted in Europe to rescue the fellow Indians. We posted this requirement immediately on the supply demand initiative that we were doing. A startup called Mogli Lab. It's a DPIIT recognized startup. They provided active response and facility to these orders in a stipulated time. So 1, the order matchmaking was done. 2nd, any logistics issue from, sending these orders to the Air India factory from where they had to be sourced and had to be taken for their cabin luggage was facilitated end to end by the team. And this was done all within a week's time. Air India had the shipment that they needed to fly, and it was all done through the digitizing of the procurement supply chain that we had created. 2nd, what the government also did was that an open innovation call for application was done to know what are the technologies which startups are doing. While we had initial set already, but a lot of startups had pivoted during this times to supply, to meet the demands of the time. We received about 700 plus solutions through this open call for application across 10 categories. So right from critical care equipment, preventive and assistive, to geo-tracking, movement management, fake news detection, because that was also important. There was an interministerial committee set up with Niti Aayog, Department of Biotechnology and Department of Science and Technology that evaluated all these technologies and categorized them as per, be deployed and immediately deployed versus the ones which needed still some time. Out of the technologies that came here, there are about a few that have already been funded by investors and are being deployed at state government. To give you an example, J-Clean is a technology that has been eyed by a lot of private players as well. What they do is that, they've attracted the attention of, Novartis and Alco, and have a sanitization solution for surface cleaner, and they are using a negative ion generator. So that helps to control virus, bacteria, fungal infection in a controlled, closed environment. So not only is this being used by states right now in their quarantine zones, but even trying this because everyone will have to start opening their factories right now in a phased manner. So they're looking at these solutions to sanitize. We had one more solution called SynPhNe, which uses a chip to track movement tracking of patients either in a quarantine zone or for employees in factories. So industries like Aditya Birla came forward to support and fund this startup, and they are now being deployed in certain quarantine zones. And Aditya Birla within its factory also is trying to deploy this. So some interesting innovations got the traction of the market, and not just India. In fact, Blinken, which is a DPID recognized startup, is supporting China and Yuan factories through the innovations that
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, those are interesting examples and help to set the perspective a little bit. So let's switch tracks a little now. Sudhir, coming to you as an investor who obviously understands the other challenges that entrepreneurs have. Aastha's outlined some of the measures that the Indian government has introduced, and clearly there have been some success stories. But from your point of view as an investor, do you really think that these have translated into attractive opportunities for startups who are looking to expand in the Indian space? Is something missing? What more needs to be done? Sudhir, you need to unmute yourself. That's one of the challenges we have to remember in these webinars. Thank you.
I think in the last 8 weeks, government has taken substantial measures, as Aastha outlined, including debt from Sidhi. But let me just step back a bit and say, pre-COVID, we have an industry in the VC private equity industry, which is approximately invested $140 billion in the last 6 years and exited $80 billion. And about 15 to 20% is venture capital. So effectively, it's a very vibrant ecosystem. And if you look at the size of the ecosystem, and again, I'll give some of our numbers, which is a proxy because I don't have the industry numbers. But if you look at just our 50-odd companies, there's revenue at $1 billion right now. Okay. And so it's a very vibrant system overall. Now, on 22nd of March, it came down. It came down to zero. So it was not a sinusoidal wave. It was a square wave, straight to zero. And effectively now what's happening is, it's for whatever the government needs to do, it's important to understand what the entrepreneurs are doing. So entrepreneurs, the physical side of the business stopped because of logistics, because of social distancing and so on and so forth. So no shipments were taking place. So many entrepreneurs became absolutely agile. And that's, I think, the beauty of the Indian ecosystem. They started pivoting. So what did we see in the last 8 weeks? We saw new products, new services, new business models, new revenue models, and we saw digital coming up. So when doctors were consulting at clinics, they started consulting at home through apps, fitness at home, nutrition at home. So a lot of digital services, the amount of payments went shooting up right now because nobody could go to the banks overall in a digital manner. So this is what happened in the last 8 weeks. Now, effectively, this all requires funding, by the way. Okay. Now, I think Sidhi has done a wonderful job with government coming in at that level in terms of fund of funds. And I do believe that there should be more of that because the leverage factor on that for VCs like us is maybe 1:4. I think there is one area which the government needs to unleash, and it has been about 20 years it is not unleashed. This is the right time to do it. India has seen enormous amount of capital in the last 5 weeks, like Facebook, like Vista, like Silver Lake coming in, though to Geo, but that's a signal that, look, the underlying asset in India is still growing. And today, from 100 or 150 million people who buy and sell on the net, we are looking at 300 to 400 million people in the next 5 years. That's an enormous growth pattern. Incidentally, you must understand that the companies which are over 100 million market cap in India account for something like 4.1% of GDP in the private markets. Okay, that's an enormous. What do they need? They need capital. Indian rupee capital, family wealth itself is 2.5 to 3 trillion. And that has higher tax rates than international coming to India, international capital coming to India. So if you were to ask me one big thing to unleash capital sources in the country, right? It is absolutely critical for the government to realize that while international capital today forms 95% of investments in PEVC in the country, it is this 5% which should be made to grow, okay, to 20 to 25% in not more than 5 years. How do you do that? There is a adverse tax policy which has been relevant in the country for 20 years plus, which private investments into companies have to pay higher tax than public markets and have to pay higher tax than international investors. This has to be removed, and this is a great time to remove it. Government will earn more through taxes. Government will earn more through employment if it does this. If it doesn't do this, then the norm is very simple. If Indians don't invest in their own country in risk asset class, which creates the new companies, right, then international capital will think twice overall. So that to me is the best opportunity, and the only thing I would request the government to do right now, and very fast.
Excellent. Thank you. And we're beginning to get questions fast and furious. So before I go on to that, just to make sure that we also introduce Abhijeet to the audience and everybody understands, the kinds of questions he can answer. So given your experience, Abhijeet, as a startup that was headquartered in Singapore, then you made inroads into India, which is substantially different from the market that you were used to. How did you sort of face the challenges of a different market reality, of the differences in India as compared to what you were used to in Singapore? And what could have been easier for you, as an entrepreneur, so that we get a sense of what else perhaps we need to ask about in this regard?
Right, Vinika. Let me just answer that by first just quickly telling everybody as to what SynPhNe does, just so that you can understand my answer in the right perspective. So SynPhNe actually is an abbreviation. It stands for Synergistic Physio Neuro Platform. Okay, so it's actually a digital neurological therapeutics company that uses technology with wearables to restore function and cognition in patients who are afflicted with stroke, TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's, and other neurological ailments. Okay, so this technology is unique in that it can sort of be used by a patient to do therapy at home by himself or herself. Okay, so which is very different to what is conventionally known for physiotherapy and occupational therapy, where the therapist actually helps the patient in the entire process. In this instance, the patient can use this technology and work on himself to get better. Okay, so that's the way it is unique and fundamentally different to everything else. So, and importantly, the therapy protocol and patient progress can be monitored completely online, okay, which is a huge asset in these times. And each therapy session actually generates a report that can be sort of analyzed and understood and suggested improvements on. Okay, so that's fundamentally what the technology does. Now, we are still headquartered in Singapore. Singapore is where actually the entire research was done and the product was launched and so on. But first of all, why did we choose India? For very obvious reasons. It's a very large market. Okay, just to give you an example, if I just look at the stroke market in India, it's 8 million patients. Okay. And about 1.5 to 2 million being added every year. So obviously one is the market size. In terms of difference between Singapore and India, there are some very obvious differences which we had to sort of take into account when we evolved the strategy. One is the sheer size of the country. So just as we can launch in the entire of Singapore, we can't do that in India. We have to decide where to launch first, which part of the country. So we said West and South because that's more open to new technology. The population, of course, is very heterogeneous in India. The people in the West are very different to the people in the North and so on. So we have to take that into account into our strategy. Very importantly, there is a big difference in terms of the emotional component that we had to cater to when we had to decide on the processes, okay, in dealing with the patients, which is that most patients in India are not that much process driven. So you can't typically explain to them what they have to do and they do it by themselves. So, we had to guide them. So all these things we have to take into account, which is very different to what we had to do in Singapore. Okay, so we actually went about sort of implementing the strategy through 3 main channels. The first one is what we call as a B2C, which is through SynPhNe Care Centers. So these are different centers that we establish throughout the country, starting with the West and the South, where the patients actually come, they take the therapy, they get trained, and then eventually get transitioned to taking the device home. So either they buy it or rent it and use it at home. The other is a typical B2B channels in which we sell to hospitals. And the third one, very importantly, is the D2C, which is the direct channel to a customer, an online channel where the patient buys directly, okay, or rents it and starts using it at home with some guidance from us online. Because these are the three main channels. We had actually hoped to sort of start the online, the third channel, a little later on in the year, towards the third quarter or beginning of fourth quarter. But thanks to COVID, of course, we pulled it forward. And in fact, in the last 2 months, that's the channel that we have completely focused on. So everything online now, right from shipping the device online to setting it up at the patient's house, to guiding the patient to do the therapy, to monitoring and everything. So that's basically how things have changed. And to be honest, we're actually more busy than we were before COVID. Yeah. So that's really, in summary, what we did.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And so, we have a number of questions coming in. Before I get to the first question, I just want to comment for Aastha that, there's been interest in finding out more about some of these specific sort of initiatives and measures that you've outlined. So if there is some online link that our listeners can go to get more information on that, it'll be fantastic. You can share it with us on chat now if you have them. I have it handy, or else maybe, just send it across later to TiE and we'll be able to share it.
Sure. I'll add it to the chat window. It's there on our website. I'll share the link.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Aastha. Sudhir, we have a lot of questions on VC deal flow and what's happening in that regard. So let me take a question from Jayesh, which has had a lot of traction from other people. Question for you. How much has the VC investments in India declined over the past 6 months? And if you can, pick up your crystal ball and tell us, what will the trend be like going forward?
I think all VCs are extremely tied up today in taking care of their portfolio because, as I mentioned earlier, revenues dropped to zero on 22nd March. And today recovery is happening. It's very important that what capital allocation to companies which are in the existing portfolio, they need support. So to that extent, I would say 100% of the VCs are occupying almost all of their time in assisting their existing portfolio. It's been 8 weeks now. Some of us, if not many, are starting to open up and look new deals right now. But if I look at the ability to do, there is a lot of dry powder in India. Let's be clear about that. At all stages of capital, whether it's a seed, Series A, B, C, D, and all the alphabets of the this thing. So it's not a problem on availability of capital. I think we would say, how does the lockup open? How are our current companies scaling? And crystal ball gazing is absolutely not possible right now because state to state it varies. We would like to see whether our existing companies are scaling properly, for a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months to just get a pattern overall, and then start taking calls because new entrepreneurs will also come and say, hey, here is my projection. And it's very important for a VC to take a call whether that projection is going to be, worth its while considering or not. And I think that's what is happening right now. So this year, I think overall, most VCs will open up, if not already opened up for investment. We just made our first post-COVID investment 2 weeks back overall. And it's a seed company. And we are about to make 2 more in the next 30 days. Those were companies which we were already looking at. So I don't think there is dearth of capital. I don't think VCs are going to hesitate, but we're going to watch and slow down and watch whether the projections are going to be met because nobody knows how the opening up of the market happens.
Yes, if you hadn't answered it already, I was going to put you on the spot and ask whether you're investing more, whether what your appetite is like. But thank you, you sort of handled that already. Excellent. Okay, so Aastha has kindly put the link up on our chat window. So those of you who are interested in finding out more about that, feel free to go in there and find out more there. Okay, let me go on to another interesting question, which I think. Let's see, you can decide who's best equipped to answer this. This is from Saurabh and again has traction from various other people. When we're discussing the financial package released by the government of India, what financial institutions are listed by them to whom one can approach for a loan? Just the banks or any other VC firms? Is the question clear to you, Aastha, perhaps?
Yeah. So I'll take that question up. There are there are two loan things that have been put in right now. One is equity fund of funds. So I'm going to take the loan one first. The emergency working capital loan that is there for startups. And I saw one more question that was there from the audience from Flexibin, and I could probably cover that in. It is actually true that it is there for the MSMEs that have been badly hit and need additional funding to buy materials and restart. So this line of business is available for startups that already have an outstanding credit as of end of February 2020. And for up to 25 crore of outstanding amount and about covering up to 100 crores. It is a 4 years tenure, and the thing is that the 100% credit guarantee will be given to banks and NBFCs. So I, as a government, is giving a guarantee cover to any bank or any NBFC from which the MSME or startup has already taken a loan. So it could be any bank that you already have a loan that would be given a separate guarantee cover by the government. Similarly, the additional 20,000 crore subordinate debt that is there for stressed MSME will go to CGTMSE, which is the credit guarantee support given by the ministry to banks. So again, this is going as a guarantee cover to the departments, and it is eligible for all the banks that have taken this cover already. So you have to have a bank loan already, and that will be covered by the government. Since both these facilities under the loan are being provided to MSMEs or startups that already have a loan, let me just give you a highlight of what the government is trying to do right now is working on a new scheme dedicated to startups as per the eligibility by DPIIT. That will be similar to what we have CGTMSE right now. It will be CGS for startups. So it's a credit guarantee scheme with a corpus of over 2,000 crore over the next 4 years. And we are hoping to go, we're working on this scheme to go live as soon as possible.
Perfect. And very quick question to you on this one about for investors wanting to invest in, for Singapore entrepreneurs wanting to go into India. Is there an Invest India desk in Singapore?
So there is no Invest India desk in Singapore. We have one physical presence only in India, but Startup India has 10 bridges, what we call as international bridges with 10 partner nations. Singapore happens to be one of them. It's a soft landing platform where we look at any query that comes to us through that platform. We directly look at that and we help them navigate the ecosystem in terms of getting them clearances and licenses, in terms of getting them recognized as under the government, in terms of helping them connect with further suppliers, investors or corporates, whatever support that they need. And I'm going to post that link up in the chat window as well for the ease of users.
Thank you so much. I think some of the chat might not be open for everyone to see. So Sidhi, if you could just make sure that it gets put where all our audience can see it. Okay, I have a question now back to, I'm just trying to find the relevant question. So this was actually asking about investors who are interested in investing more in India, which I'm sure is something that we are all very happy to hear about. And I think the question was from Puneet, asking Sudhir's advice, some sectoral advice on this.
Sorry, sectoral advice on which sectors to invest in?
Yes. I think that's what.
So I think the sectors which, if I take the signal red, green, and amber, okay, travel is red, hospitality is red, and it will take some time to become amber and green. I think finance and especially fintech will start, going towards green from amber right now, because fundamentally in the country, credit has to happen, and credit, as and when it loosens up with all the government actions coming in, it will go down to the entrepreneurs. What is absolutely green today is digital. What is absolutely green today is health, is the whole space of deep tech in the country, is now the whole space of within health, live classes, education, ed tech. I think these are the let's say green sectors. Okay, and if you even extend this a bit, I think the whole area of impact would actually gain a lot more. Agri tech is one area. which is green, especially if you're using digital technologies to help farm productivity in the country. We have seen these move up very, very rapidly. And I'm talking about a short term. I'm talking about 3 to 4 months because this is visible right now. And we ourselves are seeing this scale up in our portfolio, in these kind of portfolios. If I take a slightly medium term view, then logistics and mobility will start ramping up because it takes a little bit of time for the offline world to scale up in the market space. And I think the last but not the least, I truly believe is a very big opportunity is for moving supply chain from China to India. It's a phenomenally big opportunity. And to that extent, late stage capital in India is actually available. So if companies want to move supply chain to India and investors can sort of get onto those bandwagons, that's a great opportunity because India is building that in a very conscious manner.
Excellent. Thank you. And one of the main areas Sudhir spoke about was healthcare, health certainly. And so my next question is to Abhijeet to ask you about, since that's the field you're in, any trends in healthcare that you see are accelerating due to COVID, and hence what sort of steps would an organization like yours take in reaction to that?
Well, the trend that is accelerating is the most obvious one, which is that of telehealth. I was, frankly reading an HBR article that just appeared a couple of days ago in which McKinsey has estimated, this is of course for the US, that the telehealth revenue is likely to grow from 3 billion US last year to 250 billion this year. In India, I understand it's going to grow about 3 times last year to this year. It's about $2 billion is what they're estimating this fiscal year to be, which is 3 times that of last year. So clearly, that's a clear trend. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind, that it's not it's not just that anybody who does telehealth is actually going to thrive, but what is important is whatever service you provide online, that service has to be found of value to the customer, which means that they actually need to use that service continually. They need to get easy access to it. The person who is actually delivering that service has to do it, sufficiently well so that it actually delivers the outcome. So unless all of these things are actually benefiting the patient or the customer, it's not that just because you start something online, it's going to really succeed. So that's something that that we are very mindful of in the way we have gone about strategizing and completely moving a model from offline into online, in that we take a great deal of care in how we sort of approach the patient, how we do the entire therapy online, what kind of reports are generated, how often are those reports sort of discussed with the patient, what kind of care we take, etc., and all of that. So I think these are very important things. If I may say that there needs to be a great deal of training as well for companies, to shift to a telehealth channel straight away. It's not that you can just turn a switch and turn it overnight. But I think these are very, very important things to keep in mind. But clearly, that's the direction. That's where it's all going to head. Everybody says that COVID is here to stay. Corona maybe another year, maybe another 2 years. So we'll have to take all this into account.
Vinika, can I just add to your earlier question? In terms of the opportunity for international investors, there is one area which has been
to our audience, so please do.
Yeah, there is one area which I think is really going to go bigger now, and that is Indian entrepreneurial companies going global. If you look at our active base of companies, about 50% have a global footprint in 30 countries. Now that's something which has happened already, and it's on a smaller scale right now. So many of these companies which are today domestic leaders are already going outside the country, and they will become bigger outside the country. That will need capital, and that will need early stage capital, that will need late stage capital, and that's an opportunity.
All right. Yes. Okay. That makes sense. And just, again, because we are still talking about COVID and the impact it has, Sunil had just a follow-up sort of a question about, is this the right time to be approaching for funding, given valuations will be a problem? How do you feel about that? And I think we might have time for just about one question after that. So if I could have a very quick response from you, Sudhir.
Well, for entrepreneurs, any time is the right time overall. Entrepreneurs, we as VCs, will look at whether there's a product which is really valuable, it's solving a real problem, quality of team, and does it have the potential to grow bigger in the country and a dominant position and go global? And if that criteria is met, I mean, today investors are investing. It's not that they're not investing. Yes, valuations, will they be lower? Answer is yes. If public markets have fallen by 30%, you don't expect private markets to be that bigger. But net, will you be able to raise capital? It may be delayed, but good companies will raise capital.
Excellent. Okay, I have been asked to start wrapping up because this time has gone by really quickly, and there's lots of wonderful questions in the box actually, and I wish we could handle a few more. Maybe one last one to end these things on a provocative note. People are saying that the loss of foreign investment and funding would be impacting tech startups the most. So does this mean that then these tech startups would start to uproot from India, relocate out of India? What's your view? And if I could ask each of you to very quickly say yes or no to that one.
I think the ability for, by the way, venture is 70% tech startups. So effectively, we are talking only about tech startups. Tech startups will continue to be funded because at the angel level, it's predominantly rupee capital. And to that extent, I don't think there'll be a dearth of capital in the market space. There may be a slowdown temporarily, 3-6 months, but it'll come back. And more capital initially will go to funding existing startups overall. The reason why companies move headquarters to outside the country is because there's a supply chain gap in the country. So for instance, if you look at software where the company has to access the US market space, the CEO needs to be in the US, and there are very few VCs in the country who fund software companies. There are very few VCs in the country who fund the full supply chain of health tech, by the way. Medical devices is a good example. So the question is, if an international investor comes back and says, I want you to be headquartered near my office, US, and only then I will fund you, companies will move. I think that's where I come back to the original point. It's very important for the government to start seriously thinking and not ignoring rupee capital, right? Because if capital comes from international, then companies will shift. If capital comes from India, then companies will tend not to shift. So it's very, very crucial that rupee capital gets its right and does not get ignored. And it should be done in the next 30 to 60 days. I'm going on a limb and saying this because otherwise you will continue to see a flight of companies outside the country.
Thank you. So actually just related to that, and that's probably going to be the last question we're allowed to take, is the fact that another reason why Indian startups have, for instance, some of them in recent times been flipping their holding structures to Singapore. And one of the reasons they're citing, and this is an interesting question about investors and founders are saying that the certainty of regulations in Singapore is a primary driver for that. So in addition to the other comments made by Sudhir, now this is about, regulations changing. I think possibly there's some reference to, the regulations related to FDI from neighboring countries, various other things like this. So what steps, Aastha, are being taken by the Indian government, as much as you can tell us, in terms of implementing giving some stability, so that founders and investors have a little bit more sense of calm in that direction?
Right. So acknowledging what Dhir also said, and I've gone through the questions that the panelists have posted in the Q&A section, we have done a detailed analysis of the Indian startup ecosystem vis-a-vis other countries where the startups are, changing their base and headquartering. We've presented the analysis to the relevant department. In the last 4 months, at least 20 stakeholder consultations have already happened with the concerned tax ministry, that is CBDT, and with MCA for making it incorporating easier within India. And if you see, the reason why India has gone up in the ease of doing business is also because of these little changes that are happening. We have made it, we have submitted a detailed report to MCA on making incorporation easier for startups. That has been taken care of. We have had detailed round of discussions with CBDT, and that's where I think, Sudhir, you should know that we are trying to bring in parity between capital gain taxes for listed and unlisted securities. We are trying to fight that battle with the concerned ministries. we have already resolved the ESOP issues that were the concerns of a lot of startups for investments. And we're trying to broaden that ESOP pool, because right now, with the current notification, it is limited to a certain set of startups within the broader range. So we are trying to help startups, pay their employees with ESOPs and avoid double taxation on that. What we do is that, we are all ears to all these regulatory changes that the stakeholders provide us, and we take them up very proactively. In fact, every year we organize an investor summit. It is, scheduled for the first Friday of December, and the minister, the Commerce and Industry Minister himself chairs that program. And a lot of issues were brought about by investors, both domestic and global, as a part of the venture capital summit that we organize annually. All those issues, some have seen the light of the day. The ESOP happened. We are still trying to get the capital gain taxes done, but angel tax issue, that was Section 5672B, that was a major concern, has been taken care of. So the government is aware of all these issues. We are trying day by day to help resolve it. But if you think there are other measures which need more representation, we'd be happy to listen to them and provide a resolution. And you can reach out to me directly, or I can, or through TiE Singapore, however that works.
That's a wonderful offer. So, and I'm sure we'll be taking you up on that. So thank you very much, Aastha, for that. And I want to now, because we do have to wrap up, I want to thank the audience, first of all, for some really excellent questions. And I think this will help us shape our next TiE Huddle. Sidhi, I'm sure you're making note of some of the questions and comments that have come in. I want to take a quick moment to thank our panelists and thank you all for having been with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vinika, for moderating this session. Sudhir, Abhijeet, Aastha, thank you for this insightful discussion. I hope the Singapore startups who are planning to expand in India, this discussion definitely calls for round 2, but would help them immensely taking it forward from here. Thank you, Enterprise Singapore, for collaborating with us for this Huddle session. We look forward to seeing all of you again next month. First Wednesday of every month, we'll be doing a Huddle. So 1st of July will be yet another topic where we would like to, share investor, founder, and government perspectives. So if you have any issues that you think you would want us to create a huddle on, please let us know. And finally, all the questions that you have asked us, we would share it with our speakers. Thank you again, once again, Vinika, Sudhir, Aastha, and Abhijeet. Bye.